Beneath the burning sun of southern India, where boulders stand like giants frozen in time, lies a city of ruins that whispers of a forgotten greatness. The ruins of Hampi, scattered across the landscape of Karnataka, do not merely tell the story of a fallen kingdom. They echo the glory of Vijayanagara, the lost empire of India, an empire that once rivaled the greatest civilizations of the world. Imagine a city so grand that foreign travelers compared it to Rome, Constantinople, and even the fabled cities of the East. Its streets were wide and bustling with merchants from across the oceans, Persians, Portuguese, Arabs, and Chinese. Its markets glittered with gems, silks, and spices. Its temples soared into the skies, adorned with sculptures that seemed to come alive in the moonlight. This was Vijayanagara, the city of victory. But like a candle burning too brightly, it perished suddenly, in fire and blood. Within a single day, one of the wealthiest cities in the world was reduced to ash. How could such grandeur vanish so quickly? And why does this empire remain shrouded in mystery, hidden behind the silence of ruins and fragments of forgotten chronicles? Tonight, we journey into the world of Vijayanagara, its rise, its glory, its fall, and the secrets it still guards. For in the ruins of Vijayanagara lies a puzzle that historians, archaeologists, and dreamers have tried for centuries to solve. A puzzle of power, betrayal, and fate. The 14th century was an age of upheaval in the Indian subcontinent. The mighty Delhi Sultanate, under the Khaljis and Tughlaqs, had extended its reach deep into the Deccan. Armies swept down from the north, plundering temples, burning towns, and bringing chaos to the lands of the south. The ancient kingdoms of the Cholas, Pandyas, and Hoysalas crumbled under this relentless assault. Yet from this storm, a new power emerged. Two brothers, Harihara and Bukka, once commanders under the Kampili kingdom, would become the founders of something far greater. Captured by the armies of the Delhi Sultanate, they were forced to convert to Islam and serve under the northern rulers. But legend tells that, aided by their spiritual guide, the sage Vidyaranya of Sringeri, they returned to their homeland, reclaimed their faith, and with renewed resolve laid the foundation of a new kingdom in 1336 CE. They chose a site unlike any other. Nestled among massive granite boulders, with the Tungabhadra River to the north and impregnable hills all around, this land was both a fortress and a sanctuary. The brothers named it Vijayanagara, the city of victory. From its very inception, Vijayanagara was more than a capital. It was a statement, a declaration that the South would not bow before northern invaders, that Hindu kingship and culture would endure, and that a new colossus had risen to protect the Deccan. Harihara established the foundations of governance, fortifying the city and expanding its borders. His brother Bukka carried the torch further, defeating rivals and extending Vijayanagara's influence across Karnataka, Andhra, and beyond. By the mid-14th century, the empire stretched from the western coast of the Arabian Sea to the eastern Bay of Bengal. Dynasty succeeded dynasty, the Sangamas, the Saluvas, and finally the Tuluvas, each expanding the empire's reach. And under the Tuluva king Krishna Devaraya, reigned 1509 to 1529, Vijayanagara reached the zenith of its glory. Krishna Devaraya was a conqueror, a patron of the arts, and a visionary. His armies crushed enemies from Odisha to the Deccan sultanates. His rule brought stability, prosperity, and confidence. Poets in Telugu, Sanskrit, and Kannada flourished under his patronage. He built temples, strengthened forts, and opened the city to merchants from across the known world. Foreign travelers marveled at what they saw. The Portuguese envoy Domingo Paes wrote of wide streets, markets overflowing with jewels, and an army numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Another traveler, Fernão Nunes, spoke of a city as large as Rome, teeming with people, with walls that stretched for miles and fortifications that seemed impossible to breach. But Vijayanagara was more than politics and power. It was a vision of permanence. Built on stone, carved into the very hills, the city seemed eternal. Its founders believed it would stand as the guardian of the South forever. Yet even as Vijayanagara shone like a jewel, shadows gathered at its edges. The neighboring sultanates, Bijapur, Golconda, Ahmadnagar, Bidar, and Berar, watched with envy. Rivals plotted, alliances shifted, and the seeds of destruction were quietly sown. For every empire that rises must one day be tested. And Vijayanagara, the city of victory, was destined to face a reckoning unlike any other. The ruins of Hampi, scattered across 30 square kilometers of rocky plains and granite hills, are but fragments of what once was. Yet even in their ruined state, they overwhelm the senses. At the city's core rose the Virupaksha temple, dedicated to Lord Shiva, its massive gopuram, a towering gateway, adorned with tier upon tier of sculptures depicting gods, demons, and celestial beings. This temple is unique, for unlike most of Vijayanagara's monuments, it still lives. Pilgrims continue to worship here, just as they did when the empire flourished. To the east, the Vitala temple stood as a jewel of architecture, a masterpiece of design and engineering. Its most famous feature remains the stone chariot, carved from granite with exquisite detail. Wheels seemingly poised to turn though they remain forever still. The temple's pillared halls were unlike any in the world, musical pillars that produced distinct tones when struck. To this day, no one fully understands the mastery behind them. Were they the product of sheer craftsmanship, or do they conceal forgotten knowledge of sound and resonance? Palaces once adorned the royal quarter, structures of wood, stucco, and stone, their gilded domes lost to fire and time. The Lotus Mahal, with its delicate arches and symmetrical design, still speaks of refinement and elegance, while the elephant stables, built for royal war elephants, display Indo-Islamic influences that reveal the cosmopolitan nature of the empire. Water systems, too, astonished visitors. Stepwells, aqueducts, and tanks like the Pushkarani reflected not only engineering genius, but also a cultural devotion to water as sacred life. Some of these systems still work today. Even in ruins, Vijayanagara's architecture whispers of a civilization that sought permanence in stone, carving its glory into the earth itself. But architecture alone does not define a city. It was the soul of its culture and faith that gave Vijayanagara its true grandeur. Vijayanagara was not merely a capital of politics and trade, it was a guardian of Hindu civilization. In an era when northern India fell to repeated invasions, the rulers of Vijayanagara saw themselves as defenders of Dharma. Temples were not just places of worship, they were centers of culture, where music, dance, and learning thrived. The rhythms of Bharatanatyam echoed in temple courtyards, accompanied by the evolving strains of Carnatic music. Poets composed in Sanskrit, Telugu, and Kannada under royal patronage, their verses celebrating gods, kings, and the eternal beauty of the land. The empire was deeply religious, yet also strikingly tolerant. While Hinduism dominated, Jain temples dotted the landscape, and Muslim traders were allowed to build mosques within the city. Foreigners marveled at this blend of devotion and openness. Religious festivals transformed Vijayanagara into a living spectacle. The Grand Mahanavami festival filled the streets with processions of elephants, horses, dancers, and musicians. Kings appeared in full regalia, showering the crowds with gifts, while the temples glowed with lamps, creating a city of light beneath the starry Deccan sky. Faith gave the city strength, but it was trade that gave it wealth beyond imagination. Vijayanagara was a crossroads of the world. Situated strategically between the western Arabian Sea and the eastern Bay of Bengal, the city controlled vital inland routes as well as overseas trade through ports like Goa and Batkal. Its markets were the stuff of legend. Portuguese visitors described streets lined with jewelers, goldsmiths, and traders selling diamonds by the handful. One bazaar specialized entirely in horses, imported from Arabia and Central Asia, so crucial to warfare that they were worth their weight in gold. From across the seas came silks from China, porcelain from Persia, spices from Malabar, and pearls from the Gulf. Outward flowed cotton, rice, iron, and precious stones. Traders from Venice to Hormuz found their way to Vijayanagara, drawn by the promise of riches. The empire's wealth was not accidental. It was carefully built on agricultural abundance. Vast irrigation networks turned the dry Deccan plains into fertile fields, producing rice, sugarcane, and millet in abundance. Surplus fed the capital and fueled its prosperity. But the heart of Vijayanagara's trade was not just wealth. It was spectacle. Imagine walking down a street where alongside baskets of bananas and coconuts, one could purchase rubies, emeralds, and sapphires. To visitors, it seemed like a city where fortune itself was sold in the marketplace. Yet wealth alone does not make a city great. It is the life of its people, the rhythm of their days, that completes the picture. What was it like to live in Vijayanagara at its peak? Accounts tell of 500,000 inhabitants, a population rivaling the greatest cities of the world at the time. The streets were broad and planned, with houses of mud and brick for commoners and elegant mansions for nobles. Markets bustled from dawn to dusk, their sounds mingling with temple bells and the distant trumpeting of elephants. Women played an active role in trade, selling fruits, spices, and cloth. Skilled artisans crafted jewelry, pottery, and bronze idols. Children ran between stalls, while travelers marveled at the diversity of languages and cultures. The royal processions were sights to behold. Kings rode on elephants adorned with gold and silk, followed by armies of cavalry and musicians. Festivals filled the air with color, laughter, and devotion. And yet, beneath the grandeur, life was fragile. Farmers depended on monsoons, soldiers lived and died on the battlefield, and the shadow of rival kingdoms always loomed. Still, the people of Vijayanagara lived with pride, believing their city eternal. But no city, however magnificent, is free from envy. Beyond its glittering walls, enemies gathered in silence, sharpening their swords for the day when Vijayanagara would be tested. No empire rises without rivals, and no throne is secure without enemies lurking at its gates. Vijayanagara, for all its grandeur, was surrounded by powers that watched with envy and suspicion. Its very success was a challenge to those who shared the Deccan Plateau, and in time, the region became a chessboard of alliances, betrayals, and endless wars. To the north of Vijayanagara lay its greatest foe, the Bahmani Sultanate. Founded in 1347, stretching across much of the Deccan, the Bahmanis and their successors in the Deccan Sultanates, Bijapur, Golconda, Ahmadnagar, Bidar, and Berar, shared uneasy borders with Vijayanagara for 2 centuries. The rivalry was more than territorial. It was ideological. Vijayanagara stood as a bastion of Hindu kingship and culture, while the Bahmani and successor sultanates represented the spread of Islamic power in the south. Each side sought dominance not only over land, but also over the soul of the Deccan. The frontier between the two was known as the Raichur Doab, a fertile strip of land between the Krishna and Tungabhadra rivers. This region became the most fought-over territory in southern India, changing hands dozens of times across centuries. Whoever controlled the Doab controlled trade routes, resources, and prestige. The wars were brutal. Battles raged with war elephants thundering across the plains, cavalry clashing in clouds of dust, and fortresses bombarded with cannon fire. Vijayanagara's armies were formidable, composed not only of native soldiers, but also of foreign mercenaries. Archers from Africa, cavalry from Arabia, and gunners from Portugal. The empire was a melting pot of military expertise, and its kings were masters of strategy. Yet the sultanates were no less determined. Though often rivals among themselves, they knew that Vijayanagara was a threat to them all. Time and again, they put aside their quarrels to launch joint campaigns against their southern neighbor. The struggle reached its height during the reign of Krishna-Devaraya. Victorious in numerous campaigns, he defeated the Sultan of Bijapur, humbled the kings of Odisha, and even imposed tribute upon his enemies. The Raichur Doab, long contested, came under Vijayanagara's control after a decisive victory in 1520. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the empire was unstoppable. But empires thrive on strength and falter on complacency. After Krishna-Devaraya's death, the unity and vigor of the empire began to wane. Court intrigues, succession struggles, and overconfidence left Vijayanagara vulnerable. Meanwhile, the sultanates, despite their rivalries, grew increasingly aware of a shared truth. Vijayanagara's power was too great to allow any single sultan to face it alone. Slowly, an alliance formed. The five sultanates, sworn enemies in many respects, set aside centuries of conflict to unite against their common foe. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would decide not just the fate of Vijayanagara, but the very balance of power in southern India. For the Empire of Victory, the coming storm would be unlike any it had ever faced. The year was 1565. In a dusty plain near a small village called Talikota, armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands would collide in a battle that would shake the foundations of the subcontinent. What followed was not just defeat, it was annihilation. It was January 1565. The winter sun hung pale over the plains of northern Karnataka, casting long shadows across the dusty fields near the small village of Talikota. Here, two worlds faced each other in a confrontation centuries in the making. On one side stood the mighty empire of Vijayanagara, its armies glittering with the promise of invincibility. On the other, a coalition of the Deccan Sultanates, their banners united for the first time in common cause. The stakes were nothing less than the survival of Vijayanagara itself. At the head of the empire stood Aliya Rama Raya, the regent and de facto ruler of Vijayanagara. A shrewd politician and experienced general, Rama Raya had held the empire together after the death of Krishnadevaraya. But his arrogance, many said, had grown dangerous. He believed Vijayanagara's might was unbreakable, that the sultanates were too divided to challenge him. He had, after all, played them against one another for decades. But this time, the sultanates did not quarrel. Bijapur, Ahmadnagar, Golconda, and Bidar, four rivals bound by little else, had formed a grand alliance, determined to break the power of Vijayanagara once and for all. The armies that met at Talikota were immense. Chronicles speak of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, though numbers were likely exaggerated. Still, it was clear. This was one of the largest battles ever fought in the Indian subcontinent. Vijayanagara's forces were dazzling. War elephants armored in steel, cavalry clad in bright silks, and infantry carrying long spears, bows, and matchlock guns acquired from the Portuguese. Mercenaries from distant lands fought under its banners. Horsemen from Arabia, musketeers from Europe, archers from Africa. The empire's wealth was on full display. The sultanates, however, had their own strengths. Their cavalry was swift and disciplined, their commanders seasoned in the art of mobile warfare. They too had artillery and matchlocks, weapons that could pierce even the strongest armor. And above all, they had unity, a fragile but potent alliance against a common enemy, the clash. The battle began with thunder. Cannons roared, filling the air with smoke and fire. Elephants charged, their tusks capped with blades, trampling men beneath them. Cavalry units clashed in whirlwinds of dust, swords flashing in the sunlight. At first, Vijayanagara seemed to hold the upper hand. Rama Raya's forces pushed back the Sultanate's lines, and victory appeared within reach. The regent, old but still commanding, rode at the front, directing the battle with confidence. But then came betrayal. Two of Vijayanagara's key commanders, Gilani brothers, Muslim officers who had long served Rama Raya, suddenly turned against him in the heat of battle. They defected to the Sultanate side, taking their troops with them. The impact was catastrophic. Vijayanagara's army, already stretched across the battlefield, faltered as entire divisions broke away. Confusion spread, discipline crumbled, and the Sultanates seized the moment. Their cavalry swept in from the flanks, cutting down Vijayanagara's soldiers in waves. The empire's elephants, once a terrifying force, panicked and trampled their own men. The thunder of victory turned to the cries of chaos. And then, the unthinkable happened. Rama Raya himself was captured in the melee. The Sultanate soldiers, recognizing the architect of their humiliation in past wars, showed no mercy. He was executed on the battlefield, beheaded, his head displayed as a trophy of vengeance. The sight shattered what remained of Vijayanagara's morale. The great army broke, fleeing in disarray. What had begun as a proud march of conquest ended as a desperate scramble for survival. The Sultanate armies pressed their advantage, marching south toward Vijayanagara itself. The capital, once described by foreign travelers as larger and richer than Rome, was left defenseless. What followed was devastation on a scale rarely seen. The city was plundered, its palaces and temples looted, its treasures carted away or melted down. Flames consumed the markets and monuments. Statues were smashed, sacred shrines desecrated, and the jewel of the south reduced to ruins. The sack of Vijayanagara lasted months. When it was over, the city that had once dazzled the world with its wealth and beauty lay in ashes. Never again would it rise to its former glory. The Battle of Talikota was more than a military defeat. It was the death knell of an empire that had once stood as a bastion of culture, prosperity, and power. In a single day, centuries of achievement crumbled. The Deccan, once dominated by the colossal might of Vijayanagara, now lay fractured, its balance of power forever altered. For the people who survived, the memory of Talikota lingered like a scar, a reminder that even the mightiest can fall, and that empires, no matter how great, are never eternal. The dust settled on the battlefield, but the echo of that day still resounds across history. The empire of Vijayanagara may have fallen in fire and blood, but its story did not end at Talikota. Though the palaces were reduced to rubble and the temples scarred by flames, the stones themselves remained. And across the desolate plains of Hampi, those stones still speak. Today, Hampi, once the beating heart of Vijayanagara, is a haunting landscape of ruins scattered across nearly 26 square kilometers. Crumbling walls snake across the hillsides. Broken pillars rise like skeletons of forgotten monuments. And vast bazaars stand eerily empty beneath the hot southern sun. Here lie the shattered remains of once great temples. The Virupaksha temple, still active after 7 centuries, its gopuram towering defiantly into the sky. The Vitala temple, famed for its exquisite stone chariot and musical pillars. The Hazara Rama temple, whose walls tell the epic story of the Ramayana in endless carved reliefs. Even in ruin, these monuments whisper of the city's grandeur. Intricate carvings of gods, warriors, dancers, and elephants reveal a society steeped in art, mythology, and craftsmanship. Massive stone aqueducts and canals hint at an advanced hydraulic system that sustained life in the capital. Every boulder, every sculpture, is a fragment of a civilization that refused to vanish entirely. The stones also speak through words. Inscriptions carved into temple walls and copper plates preserve royal edicts, tax records, and gifts to deities. They tell us of kings who donated land, generals who built shrines, and merchants who sponsored festivals. Together with Persian, Portuguese, and Venetian travelers' accounts, such as those of Domingo Paes and Niccolo de Conti, these records paint a vivid picture of a cosmopolitan city, bustling with markets that sold everything from horses to jewels, silks to spices. Systematic excavations over the last century have uncovered palaces, minting halls, stables for war elephants, and the foundations of a once vast urban sprawl. Archaeologists found terracotta figurines, gold coins stamped with royal emblems, and ceramic wares from China and Persia, proof of Vijayanagara's far-reaching trade networks. Some discoveries are deeply mysterious. The famed musical pillars of the Vitala temple, when struck, emit different tones, baffling even modern engineers. The perfectly aligned water channels, reservoirs, and check dams reveal a city meticulously planned, as though its architects thought not only of grandeur, but of survival in a harsh landscape. Though Vijayanagara burned, its ruins remain stubbornly alive. Pilgrims still worship in temples where kings once knelt. Farmers till fields beside toppled mandapas, and historians walk the silent streets, piecing together fragments of the past. The stones of Hampi do not merely testify to destruction, they proclaim resilience. They remind us that though empires may fall, memory is carved in granite. And yet, for every discovery, countless questions remain unanswered. What secrets lie buried beneath the sands of Hampi? What treasures were hidden in the chaos of Talikota? What more might the stones still reveal if we learn how to listen? The ruins wait, silent and eternal, keeping their mysteries close. The fall of Vijayanagara is well documented in chronicles and ruins, but not everything is so clear. Within the silent stones of Hampi linger unanswered questions, whispered legends, and mysteries that defy simple explanation. One of the most enduring tales is that of the lost treasures of Vijayanagara. Contemporary accounts describe the city as so wealthy that its markets glittered with diamonds, rubies, pearls, and gold. Foreign travelers wrote of jewel-studded thrones and temples heavy with ornaments. When the city was sacked, much of this treasure was looted and carried away. But rumors persist that not all of it was taken. Villagers in the region still speak of secret tunnels beneath the palaces, of hidden chambers where gold and precious stones were concealed before the advancing armies arrived. Even today, stories circulate of farmers stumbling upon buried coins or strange artifacts in their fields. Could the empire's riches still lie buried under the dust of Hampi, waiting to be discovered? Another puzzle lies in the scale of destruction. The sultanates undoubtedly plundered and burned, yet some evidence suggests that systematic demolition took place, as if the victors intended not only to defeat Vijayanagara, but to erase its memory. Temples were defaced, idols deliberately broken, and palaces reduced to rubble. Was this purely vengeance for Ramaraya's arrogance? Or was there a deeper motive? Some historians speculate that the sultanates feared the empire's revival and sought to annihilate its cultural core. Others believe that the destruction was exaggerated by later chroniclers, painting a picture of apocalypse to emphasize the empire's fall from glory. Beyond the violence, the ruins themselves pose enigmas. The musical pillars of the Vitala temple, which produce distinct notes when struck, remain an engineering riddle. Were they designed as part of temple rituals, or did they serve a symbolic, even mystical purpose? Then there are the city's waterworks. Advanced aqueducts, stepwells, and reservoirs supplied thousands of people in an otherwise dry landscape. How did Vijayanagara's engineers achieve such precision centuries ago? And why do some channels lead to areas where no visible structures remain? Were there hidden complexes yet to be unearthed? Local folklore adds its own layer of mystery. Some say that Vijayanagara was cursed by the goddess of fortune herself, abandoning the city after Ramaraya's pride angered the divine. Others whisper that the empire's spirit still lingers in Hampi, protecting what remains. Pilgrims report strange sensations among the ruins, echoes of drums, the flicker of torchlight, as though the city has not entirely died. History offers answers, but Hampi offers riddles. Perhaps the truth lies beneath unexcavated ground or in yet undeciphered inscriptions. Perhaps the stones conceal more than they reveal. What is certain is that Vijayanagara's fall was not merely the end of a city. It was the birth of a legend, one that continues to haunt archaeologists, historians, and dreamers alike. The empire may be gone, but its secrets remain, locked in stone, daring us to uncover them. When the flames of Talikota died down and the victors withdrew with their plunder, what remained of Vijayanagara seemed destined for oblivion. The once great capital was left in ruins, its palaces hollow, its streets empty. Yet the empire's story did not end in silence. Its echoes carried across centuries, shaping South India's destiny in ways both subtle and profound. Though the capital was shattered, the empire's southern provinces endured for decades under weakened successors. Smaller courts arose in places like Penukonda and Chandragiri, preserving fragments of the Vijayanagara tradition. Literature, music, and temple building continued, even if on a reduced scale, keeping the cultural flame alive. The city itself, however, never recovered. Travelers who passed through Hampi in the centuries after the fall described a ghost city, majestic ruins haunted by memory, a warning carved in stone about the fragility of power. Yet Vijayanagara's legacy extended far beyond its borders. The empire had stood as a bulwark against northern invasions, preserving Hindu traditions and fostering a uniquely South Indian synthesis of art and religion. Its architecture influenced temple design for centuries, while its political model inspired regional rulers long after the capital's destruction. The Carnatic music tradition, Devotional poetry and temple festivals all bear the imprint of Vijayanagara's golden age. Even in decline, the empire's cultural identity seeped into the soil of the south, shaping kingdoms that followed. By the 19th century, when British antiquarians stumbled upon the vast ruins of Hampi, they were astounded by the scale of the forgotten metropolis. Scholars and archaeologists began piecing together the fragments of its story, reviving interest in an empire once thought lost to history. Today, the ruins of Vijayanagara, recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, draw pilgrims, tourists, and historians alike. Its temples are not merely relics. They are living monuments, carrying forward rituals that began over 6 centuries ago. The empire of Vijayanagara was more than a kingdom. It was a vision, a moment when South India rose in splendor and confidence. Though it fell in fire, its echoes endure in stone, in music, in memory. And perhaps that is the true legacy of Vijayanagara, that even in ruin it continues to inspire awe, reminding us that greatness may perish, but it is never entirely lost. Vijayanagara, once the jewel of the South, now a silent realm of stone. Its rise was meteoric, its glory unmatched, its fall sudden and devastating. Yet even in ruin, the empire defies oblivion. The ruins of Hampi whisper of triumphs and tragedies, of faith and ambition, of beauty and betrayal. We may never uncover all its secrets, but perhaps that is the allure. For in its silence, Vijayanagara reminds us of the fragile thread upon which civilizations hang, and the eternal mystery of how even the greatest empires can vanish into dust.